Dying by a natural cause is one thing, but losing one's life after a ritual gone terribly wrong is quite another. Yukito Urabe, the son of a dubious cult leader, Soichiro, and the latter's successor, wakes up in another world after drowning to his death. Strangely enough, he finds himself in a place where the concept of gods and religion does not exist. Things take a sudden turn when Yukito witnesses a public execution, or more accurately, a mass suicide that adheres to the country's end-of-life system. As Yukito and his newly found friends fight to take control of their own lives, a god named Mitama descends from the sky to lend them a hand. Episode number 1. Under a torrential pour of rain, a boisterous group of ripped baldies carries the main protagonist, Yukito, who is seen locked inside a wooden barrel. The look on his face says it all as he contemplates the absurd ritual his own father has brought upon him. As Soichiro claims, Yukito must participate in the religious ceremony where he'll get submerged in water for 3 days. Upon overcoming death, Yukito is set to fill his father's shoes and become the cult's next leader. For the record, Yukito isn't entirely surprised about his current ordeal as he has already had his fair share of mishaps since he was young. Even so, Yukito tries to plead for his life, but ultimately, his father turns a deaf ear. To make Yukito feel better, Soichiro assures his son that Mitama will surely save his life. As he slowly accepts his tragic fate, he's thrown straight into the depths of the sea. Shortly, his life flashes before his eyes. From one misfortune to another, Yukito asks Mitama to prove her existence. He expresses his desire to be reincarnated in a world without religion and live a normal life. Allurel, who works at a pub, quickly apologizes for the inappropriate physical advances she made while he was unconscious. Surprisingly, Allurel promises Yukito that she'll serve him until he's completely healed, even though he looks completely fine. Not to mention, as part of her apology, she offers him free food. Looking around the fantasy world, Yukito somehow feels familiar with the place. Later on, he realizes that he's transported to an alternate world. Going by the usual Isekai stories he knows, he asks Allurel where the guild is. Beaming with excitement to wield swords and magic, Yukito follows Allurel as she leads the way to the central point of the village. To his dismay, he finds himself caught up in a farming quest. While pondering the present circumstances, a madman suddenly confronts Yukito. The guy even threatens to get rid of him should he lay a finger on any woman in the village. That is until someone intervenes and forces him to drop the tough guy act. Not long after the minor scuffle, Klen formally introduces himself and Roy to the newcomer Yukito. Klen then hands him a dagger, leaving Yukito with a game face on as he anticipates cutting some goblins' throats. However, the next scene reveals that he's cutting vines while harvesting some grapes. And just like that, a month has passed, while Silurel, Allurel's elder sister, and the others take delight in a drinking spree. Yukito laments his current situation. From gardening to feeding some chickens and making wine, he's utterly displeased at his supposed-to-be fun adventure, all the while he wishes to run into a demon lord. Soon afterward, Yukito decides to get drunk in frustration. The next day in the field, a strange beast welcomes his sight. While Yukito's getting all worked up, Roy tries to calm him down by revealing the trick up his sleeve. It appears that Roy is trying to cast a spell from the book, making Yukito feel extremely excited. For the nth time, he ends up disappointed as they flee the scene as per Roy's command. It is revealed that the book is in fact a strategy book that unfolds a detailed plan for escaping the massive creatures. While Allurel manually treats his wound, Yukito is now convinced that magic does not exist in his new world. Finally getting rid of his expectations and fantasies, Yukito chooses to live in the moment, with the villagers starting to warm up to him. Later on, while sharing a casual conversation with Allurel, Yukito learns that their world is devoid of concepts of religion or any sort of spirituality. The next morning, Yukito finds a dead animal in the woods. Just as he's about to make a proper burial for it, he wonders how the villagers bury an animal, let alone their own kind. While he's engulfed in his thoughts, Roy and Allurel suddenly appear behind him. Since the duo believes Yukito went hunting alone, he decides to play along with it. Roy then flips a switch as he tells his new friend Yukito about a forbidden book. Rumor has it, just mentioning the material can put them in serious trouble. Yukito couldn't care less as he holds a tight grip on the slim hope of uncovering the mystery surrounding him. With a menacing expression, Roy reveals that it's an explicit book. Sometime later, Alurl and Roy take Yukito to the Imperial capital until the ultra-modern Imperial Palace comes into view. As Roy puts it, the Emperor taught them literally everything about their world. He then warns Yukito to avoid talking to anyone from the city. Moreover, Roy reveals that their village is despised by the Imperial citizens who are currently staring daggers at them. On a lighter note, the trio finally finds the bookstore. With a deadpan expression, Yukito grabs and opens the forbidden book, with Roy and Alurl barely gathering their wits in the background. As they head home, they come across a crowd in the streets. Curious about what's happening, Yukito squeezes himself inside and sees guards standing behind some citizens kneeling on the ground. Much to his shock, they kick the bucket on the spot after drinking something. Alurl drags Yukito outside the mob just as he's about to lose his composure. There and then, Yukito learns about the end-of-life system. Once the government puts the practice into action, the citizens have no choice but voluntarily face their demise. Roy immediately clears the air as he tells Yukito that the villagers are special since they are treated differently. Soon enough, they leave the place as the people around continue to speak of them with contempt. Later that night, after studying the book that eventually leads to an all-tied-up Yukito, Alurl confesses her true identity. As she puts it, they are outcasts thrown into the isolation camp, the village itself. She then reveals the mark on her back that separates their kind from the Imperial citizens. Since they fear death and their beliefs don't align with the government, they end up discriminating against it. Even then, Alurl confesses that she feels relieved upon meeting Yukito, who never once looks at them with disgust. Not just acting out of basic human decency, but genuinely treating them as friends. Before their conversation ends, Yukito gives Alurl the necklace that the former's father gave him as a protective charm. Yukito gets taken aback as the badly beaten Roy greets him the next morning. The latter reveals that they are labeled as deviants or abnormal. Although they're not instructed to end their lives, the government forcibly sends them to the afterlife. As such, Yukito learns that the capital has taken the sisters to face their execution. Feeling anxious, Yukito thinks about the best course of action until Klen shows up to give him a ride and rescue their allies. Unfortunately, the next scene unveils Siluri is already gone. As Alurl waits for her turn to reunite with her sister, Yukito makes his grand entrance and eliminates some of the soldiers. That is until Bertrand, the commander, steps into the scene and with a single slash, he reminds Yukito of his place. Immediately after the heroic act, Alurl shares the same fate, leaving Yukito desperate to call upon Mitama to save them. With all his remaining strength, he grabs the necklace and successfully summons a god. As soon as Mitama realizes that Yukito is already dead, she makes quick work of the enemies. With immense power, she brings Yukito and his friends back to life. At that moment, Yukito finally meets Mitama, officially introducing herself as his god. Episode 2. With a smug look on her face, Mitama states that she's supposed to revive Yukito only, but with her overflowing power, the rest of the deviants had a brush with death. As if nothing happened, the spectators leave the place, acting nonchalantly. Meanwhile, their comrades are in disbelief after seeing them back in one piece. Since the sudden turn of events worked out in their favor, they call for a celebratory drink. While everyone is in high spirits, Yukito seems to feel otherwise, as he dwells on how the Imperial capital will retaliate after the incident. He arrives at the conclusion that Mitama is his only option to stand against a formidable force. Speaking of his trump card, Mitama charges into Yukito while he talks to Klen about the country's atrocities. Confused at the sudden appearance of a strange little kid, Yukito tells Klen that Mitama is also from his country and they've known each other for a long time. Oddly enough, Roy conveys his affection toward Mitama only to be rejected in the worst way possible. With the pitiful Roy in the background, Yukito asks Mitama about her godly powers, to which she replies that she can wipe an entire brigade off the map. Seeing Mitama as a cheat code, Yukito prematurely claims victory against the capital's forces. Leaving Yukito on the edge, Mitama musters her power as she tries to summon her version of the Great Flood. While Yukito feels relieved that Mitama failed, she seemingly can't believe that she only managed to create mini waves inside the wooden mug. Mitama quickly checks her followers and gets shocked to the core after seeing that she has 0. Apparently, the more followers the gods have, the more powerful they become. While her situation is deplorable enough, Mitama throws a fit as she realizes that Yukito is not her follower, despite saving his life. From one predicament to another, Yukito receives spine-chilling news, declaring that the capital has started to investigate the incident. Instantly, the mood changes as the villagers express their worry about the looming trouble. Roy jumps into the scene to relieve the rising tension by declaring that Yukito will come up with a solution one way or another. Boosting the morale of his allies, Yukito agrees, assuring everyone's safety before leaving the rest to resume the party. On the other hand, Mitama knows all too well that Yukito is just putting up a facade. Despite the odds, he's determined to protect the villagers no matter what. By doing such, Yukito ironically resorts to creating a religion, and officially introduces Mitama as the first god in his current world. With little to no effort, Roy becomes her first follower, though Mitama has yet to convince Yukito to be the second one. As for his goals, it's either go big or go home. Yukito eyes to get Mitama a staggering 10,000 followers before the capital attacks the village. For starters, Yukito comes up with the idea of delivering a speech. Relying solely on her charisma, Mitama stresses that she has lived for billions of years, suggesting that the villagers should worship her. It's a futile effort, however, since not a single soul dares to step forward and accept her as a god. Desperate to turn the tide, Yukito takes it upon himself to showcase Mitama's supernatural ability. He puts Allurl on the spot as he reads her mind by revealing a safe assumption about her relationship problems. As it seems, everything is going as smoothly as he planned. That is until Mitama opens up her mouth and messes things up. After countless attempts to gain more followers, they fail big time. The next day, Allurl barges in frantic with worry and fear as her pet Chil becomes ill after eating poison by accident. Yukito gathers some herbs to make an antidote, but to no avail. Its condition becomes worse. In a short while, Chil is gone. Mitama steps in to revive the poor animal. Much to the sisters' relief, Chil is back in perfect health. Meanwhile, Mitama looks old and exhausted after using her power fueled by a single follower. Running out of steam, Mitama barely manages to stay conscious until she recovers her strength after gaining 2 new followers. Mitama reckons that the sisters might have some special abilities enough to give her a surge in power. Overwhelmed by the result, Mitama bursts out into maniacal laughter. Later that night, Allurl asks Mitama to bring back the Imperial soldiers to life. As the former puts it, she believes they were only carrying out their duty, and not necessarily because they wanted to. To add, Allurl thinks they would make a great addition to her drinking buddies. Despite Yukito's objection, Mitama grants Allurl's request. In a snap, their previous enemies rise from the dead. To their surprise, a woman inexplicably appears alongside the soldiers. When she's asked about her identity, they completely lose it when she mutters, "Bertrand." Episode 3. To fulfill her duty as the commander, Bertrand returns to the capital to expose the Deviant's plan. Little does she know, her loyalty and desperate claim won't suffice because of her brand new look. Not long after her earnest appeal, the guard drives her away. Since the capital has completely abandoned Bertrand, she finds herself accepting Yukito's offer to stay with them to return the favor for saving her. The following day, an uninvited guest shows up in the field. Mitama summons a legendary weapon to aid Riki, standing face to face with the strange beast. Having a main character moment, Riki picks up the blade and sets forth to attack, only to be thrown into midair in mere seconds. While Yukito and Mitama argue about the overhyped weapon, Bertrand makes a flashy entrance to save them the trouble. With a single strike, she cuts the strange beast's body in two. After the impressive display of swordsmanship, the villagers gasp in awe. Wearing the signature psychotic smirk in every anime, Yukito feels exhilarated after acquiring a decent pawn. He then takes the situation as an excellent opportunity to promote Mitama as a god alongside Bertrand as their holy knight. In the end, his cunning mind and desperate efforts pay off as he manages to convince the villagers to join the religious group. To keep the momentum going, Allurl announces to the customers that she will only serve wine to the members of their religion. From overworking Roy and making zir pots to baking cookies and offering healing services, there's no stopping Yukito until he reaches his objective. And just like that, Mitama has amassed more than 100 followers. Later that day, Bertrand disrupts Yukito's solitude as the former shows up behind him, dressed in a maid outfit. As they stare at each other, Bertrand breaks the awkward silence by asking Yukito to take her life. It appears that the poor knight is having some serious identity issues. When Yukito asks Bertrand about the number of the Imperial forces, she looks visibly shocked, assuming Yukito is planning to wage war against the government. He sets the record straight and confesses that he only wants to protect the village. Bertrand reveals that the Imperial soldiers should be the least of his worries, as the Archons, the Emperor's small elite unit, pose a bigger threat. She admits that she doesn't even hold a candle to their special powers. Speaking of which, one of the Archons, Atar, effortlessly exterminates her prey. With an expressionless face, she announces to continue her mission and hunt her next target, the village that defied the end-of-life system. Sometime later, Bertrand, sporting a new outfit, demonstrates how her sword can cut through anything in its path. Speculating that her sword is enhanced by magic, Yukito asks where she bought it. To which Bertrand informs him that only the Emperor possesses dangerous weapons, and he's the only one who understands the nature of its power. Later on, Yukito gathers Siluril, Klen, and Chil for a meeting about his present dilemma, as it seems relocating the village is impossible, and they still need more followers to awaken Mitama's full potential. In connection, Klen reveals that there are many isolation camps encircling the Imperial City. As they continue their discussion, Roy and the others pop out of nowhere after getting a whiff of Siluril's drink. Shortly, the meeting turns into a party. Elsewhere, Atar is seen communicating with Loki, who appears to be another Archon. Judging by the former's statement, she seems tired of countless encounters with numerous small fries, while Atar is itching to burn the village into ashes. Loki orders her to get rid of another strange beast in sight. Back at the village, while having a pep talk with Siluril, Yukito suddenly gets reminded of his father and the cult that went from 100 to 10,000 members in a trice. As Soichiro puts it, miracles happen through the use of force, so Yukito only needs to take over territory along with its residents. A month later, Bertrand, who looks like she finally got over the emotional damage, appears to be running out of fabric as she dons her most revealing outfit yet. While keeping a close watch on the area, someone decides to keep her company. Using her built-in database, Atar figures out Bertrand's real identity as the former commander of the Imperial soldiers. Although she's confused about how things panned out with Bertrand, Atar is certain about her next move. Tagging her as a rebel, Atar fires an attack, but Bertrand manages to dodge it. The latter tries to fight back, but unfortunately, her aesthetic armor refuses to help her win. While Atar drags the helpless Bertrand, she begs the enemy to put her out of her misery. As Atar walks back to the capital, her jaw drops at the sight of a tractor, a hose pipe, and wind turbines in the village she mistakenly thinks as strange beasts. We can't wait to find out what will happen next and how the Emperor would treat Bertrand as the former commander turned rebel and a woman. Will Yukito and the religious group members gather 10,000 followers before the Imperial soldiers wreak havoc in the village? Subscribe and like our channel to find out. Thanks for watching.